This is the Functionised Podcast, the most advanced podcast on the airwaves today. We bring you the latest in science of the human body and how to perform at a far higher level and exceed even your expectations. This podcast is brought to you by them at Functionised Integrative Therapeutics, www.functionised, Functionised, for the latest, greatest, and most efficient manner in order to live as a better version of yourself. From biofeedback, audiovisual entrainment, metabolic nutrition lab testing, chiropractic, and the advanced high-tech Fit Lab, the most efficient, effective, and always proven once a week, 15 minutes, no more, total body workout. Everything is quantified, everything is proven. Now, what you've all been waiting for, the Functionized Podcast. Over the last 35 years-ish, typically Americans have abashed fat, calling it bad. You've seen all the low-fat diets, low-fat this, low-fat that, and the number one culprit has been saturated fat. Researchers have done some studies and spun certain things and labeled saturated fat being the number one culprit of heart disease. Now, it sounds great, and oh my goodness, the hundreds of millions, not billions of dollars that have been spent on low-fat to no-fat products is amazing. But if saturated fat being the number one culprit of heart disease were true, we could pretty much kick back, eat fat-free Entenmann's, all day, and we would be in the epitome of health, right? I mean, just think about that. Pick up all the Entenmann's, donuts, crumb cakes, anything they make, and not picking on Entenmann's, it's just, I used to like Entenmann's. And you would be the fittest of the fit, an elite athlete. And I gotta say, thank goodness for scientific evolution and modern pragmatic evidence-based research containing all the pearls of wisdom. There's a study, the U.S. Surgeon General's office prompted the 7-country study, the low-fat diet fad, began back in the 80s. And the study concluded that mortality rates due to coronary artery disease in 16 separate cohort studies were directly proportional to increased saturated fat intake. And the study in of itself began to create public opinion as policies were shaped, and it resulted in ultimate reduction of total saturated fat in foods found on your local grocery store shelves. Unfortunately for the study, the 7-country study, but fortunately for us, the general public, a critical analysis was done on the study. People say that a study can prove anything, and it's right. You can prove anything in a study. But that's where the education of understanding how to do a proper critical appraisal and analysis of the research study can call out the problems. You can read a couple lines of a study that's picked out of your local magazine, and it'll sway you one way or the other. A lot of physicians will read the abstract and only the abstract because it's easy, it's quick, you can get through it and move on about your day, and you got some seemingly good knowledge. And that's fine and dandy if... Yeah, I said dandy. That's fine and good if you are reading a study that's actually properly done and it's got some weight to it. But If it doesn't, the critical analysis is going to show you what's wrong with the study. And a lot of studies are done in manners where no conclusive evidence can be seen, or it's biased, swayed in some way or another. The critical analysis of the 7-country study showed numerous confounding factors, and the entire study in itself should have been invalid. Therefore, since the 1980s, the low-fat diet, no-fat diet fad would never have existed in the first place. Let me tell you this, that saturated fat in our diet may not directly cause heart disease. I've said on our podcast many times before, saturated fat is not the enemy. If anything, it is far more stable. It is far more, it's able to not bind to the extra oxygens that oxidize your fat, causing mutation to your genetic strand. Your DNA is mutated, causing cancer when you're having the unsaturated fats because they are double bonded. Saturated fat only has a single bond between carbons, and that single bond is locked to those carbons. You're not going to get extra oxygens on them. It can happen, though, in vegetable oils, which are seemingly healthy but could be further from the truth. They're not healthy. And I find it quite profound that saturated fat does not directly cause heart disease because of everything we've been told. Thank you, research and evolution of the research. A study published in the Annals of Internal Medicine assessed dietary intake and blood levels of different fats to determine corresponding risk of coronary artery disease. And some of the findings here have concluded, just letting you know here, the Annals of Internal Medicine, if you want to look up March 18th of 2014, it says, replacing saturated fat with omega-6 polyunsaturated fat, there is no significant decrease in the risk of heart disease. No direct link was found between the correlation of saturated fat blood markers and dietary fat intake and the type of free circulating saturated fats is related to heart disease. But based on these findings, it would appear changing out saturated fat for unsaturated fat does not decrease the risk of heart disease, and eating fat does not change saturated fat blood markers. The arises with the differentiation between types of free circulating saturated fat and the relation to heart disease. So let's explore for a moment the origin of these different types of saturated fat in our system. We as humans have been programmed over time to crave certain foods. And the foods containing sugar release hormones in our brain such as dopamine. Dopamine makes us feel great. So a lot of people have difficult times with addiction because you get that dopamine rush. And once that dopamine's in the brain, you feel great, it goes through your body. Wonderful. But then when it recedes, you crave that dopamine. So what gave you that dopamine rush in the first place? I don't know, you tell me. You're the one that got that dopamine rush. But that's why your body craves certain things oftentimes. So, in this case here, humans consume sugar because they feel good for a little while. And with supposedly low fat equals heart healthy trend, the bulk of calories in the average American's diet comes then, if there's no fat, people will turn to some protein, but you're not going to have that much protein. You're going to have carbs, and typically in the form of high glycemic sugar. And remember, sugar is in almost everything. Even when you break down bread in your mouth, the amylase converts it to sugar. That's why it tastes so good. One of the cheapest and most frequently added ingredients that has found its way into grocery store shelves is always the high fructose corn syrup, which is found in especially sports drinks, breads, and even hamburgers. Yup, I said it. Check out the ingredient label on a lot of the stuff that you purchase. If you're purchasing frozen foods, hamburgers, check out the ingredients on your non-Whole Foods frozen aisle shelf and check it out. When an individual consumes sugar, the liver converts the excess into what's called palmitic acid, which is further converted into palmitoleic acid, which is a saturated fat. Increased palmitoleic acid levels in the blood lead to a higher incidence of metabolic syndrome. And symptoms of metabolic syndrome, in case you're not familiar with it, is increased visceral fat, dyslipidemia, hypertension, and insulin resistance. And these symptoms are independently associated with heart disease. Combined, they make a deadly concoction, and a result of metabolic syndrome are increased risks of non-alcoholic fatty liver, cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes mellitus. And it's been shown that there's an inverse relationship actually between margaric acid, which is a saturated fat, and coronary artery disease. So remember what I just said here. Inverse relationship. One does not cause the other. A saturated fat and coronary artery disease here are being shown to be on different sides of the spectrum here. You can find the margaric acid in dairy products, actually. In 2002, a cardiac study, as published in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, stated consumption of 35 servings per week of dairy decreases the odds of developing metabolic syndrome by 72% more than those consuming less than 10 servings per week. Caveat on this is, remember, test for success. If you're not testing, you're guessing. Some individuals do have a low-grade inflammation to dairy, whether it be cow's milk, whether it be goat milk, whether it be casein, whether it be whey. So make sure you're getting tested first and figure out what you have low-grade inflammation levels to before you start having a crap ton more of dairy here. It begins to appear more and more that saturated fat is not necessarily the leading culprit of heart disease, as in majority of studies may show, but sugar is the factor that greatly affects human physiology is not really ever taken into consideration. So when you're doing all these studies on high-fat diets causing heart disease, they're leaving out the fact that sugar is being consumed in large enough quantities to be pretty much part of the standard American diet. That is not being eliminated, so you can't necessarily say that it is saturated fat or any type of fat. But it is being shown that it is the sugar, because when you take out that fat, the sugar, people are still getting the heart disease. It looks like sugar may not be the best thing in the world for you. When I say that I consume less than 20 grams of sugar a day, and Shantae, she consumes the same 10 to 20 grams of sugar a day, and when she was getting ready for a show, she was down, I was looking at it, 5 grams at most of sugar per day. And that comes from, a scoop of peanut butter has a gram or two of sugar depending on the brand that you get there. You don't need sugar. You don't need to consume sugar. I'll keep saying it again. You don't need to take teaspoonfuls of sugar. You don't need to take drinks that have sugar in it. The reason people have dizziness spells and are having difficulties with sugar is because they've had too much sugar and you're getting that crash. Insulin is now low. You need to bring insulin back up. Let your body become regulated. Train your body in order to become more balanced and not have that crash and burn of sugar and have to get sky high on it again. The saturated fat, as I'm saying, is not the cause of heart disease as it's being understood. When a subject's carbohydrate intake is less than 50 grams with an increased consumption of saturated fat, the saturated fat levels in the blood are not increased. That was published in the Journal of Lipids in 2010. There's a study designed to take a look at comparison of carb restriction to low-fat diets and effect on metabolic syndrome. Jeff Volek, a PhD of the University of Connecticut, determined carbohydrate-restricted diets were shown to be superior to low-fat diets in correcting features of metabolic syndrome. Now, individuals that are just looking to lose weight, you reduce calories, you increase your activity level, you add resistance to it, you follow a proper program, you'll lose weight, but the caveat is it's not necessarily going to correct metabolic syndrome. It's not going to correct your ticker, your heart. It's not going to correct the genetic reproduction of your DNA. It's not going to give you a longer lifespan. It's not going to allow you to live happier. and with more vitality, you're still going to undergo this disease process. So why not do both at the same time? Why not have a lower carbohydrate? You still have your carbohydrates, but I'm saying low glycemic carbohydrates, not the sugar, and not having it throughout the day. I personally like to keep myself in more of a state of ketosis as long as possible. Ride the wave. And we've had plenty of podcasts now on intermittent fasting, and I will intermittent fast for 16 hours. So I won't eat in the morning, and I'll typically have late morning, early afternoon, I'll start eating. And it's mostly fat and some protein sprinkled in. And as the day goes on, by the end of the day, that's when I'm having all my carbohydrate intake. A lot of people have been telling me as of late, I need the carbs earlier in the day so I can burn them off throughout the day. But riddle me this. If in 1 gram of carbs, 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories, and 1 gram of fat is 9 calories, which is going to take you longer to burn off? The fat or the carb? Yeah, it's going to take you longer to burn off the fat. The carb will help swing hormone levels properly so you can get a better sleep at night. Whereas if you're having fat later at night, you're not getting necessarily the better sleep as if you have the carbs later on. And it keeps your body into more of a fat burning mode longer throughout the day. I practice what I preach, and I believe that a body fat level of around 8% right now, and I've been sustaining this body fat level for many years now on this lifestyle, with all my metabolic markers being good, if you would. And not just good for someone my age, but good for a human. And being able to function at such a high capacity, I would think, at least for myself, I'm doing something right. And what I discuss on these podcasts is, what is done, what the research says. I follow it, and you know what? If you're happy with where you're at, hopefully you are a high-functioning human being, and you're fit and extremely healthy and can quantify everything, and that's awesome. And if you do it differently than me, I'd love to hear how you do it. I really do. So experts who stated fats were bad for you, I'm going to say this facetiously, they got to be right? They're experts, right? The blobs of yellow artificial fat that you see at a gym, a doctor's office, showing what 1 pound of fat looks like, have to be there to inspire us to lose fat by stopping the consumption of it, right? It looks gross and you shouldn't eat it. It's propaganda. Our bodies need a certain amount of calories per day in order to carry out our basic physiological functions, such as, breathing. I like to breathe. That's a good thing. This is our basal metabolic rate. How many calories per day you need just to survive. Lay in bed all day, do nothing, your body will survive on a minimal amount of calories. Further activities such as exercise requires an increased body caloric intake. There is such a thing as not eating enough at times. Calories come from the macronutrients, carbs, protein, and fat. According to Dr. Volek and other colleagues, a diet consisting of an extremely low carbohydrate intake is healthy when the majority of calories do come from fat. When 70% of your total caloric intake is in the form of fat, there's an increased satiety, which is you feel more full. It improves weight loss. It decreases your risk of metabolic syndrome and a relative retention of lean mass and strength. Yeah, you can actually get stronger, and I've done it myself. I've gotten stronger consuming far more calories from fat than from carbohydrates. The protein is what builds muscle. The protein is what regenerates and rebuilds cells. So you need protein, but you can get too much. Too much, and you have an insulin rise. Too little, and you're kind of starting to waste away. So you keep protein relative to what your goals are. And that's kind of the constant. And this is how I figure out a lot of program designs, is knowing the lifestyle, knowing the body scans, knowing a lot of analytics to determine the protein. And then from there, we determine the fat and the carbs. And those that cannot tolerate fat too well have a lower amount of fat. But those that can have a higher amount of fat. And like I said, the carbs will come later on throughout the day. 70%, 70% is in the form of fat, and you have all the positive benefits I just talked about, you're going to feel a lot different. You may notice more energy. You may notice greater cognitive function. You may notice your days are improved, and you may be more successful. I had an old roommate in chiropractic school who a lot of people would mock. He'd have a pound of free-range bacon every day. And he was actually in pretty decent shape. And he was actually a little bit ahead of the curve on that one. I did say free-range bacon, and there were no nitrates added to it either. High in salt, yes. He also drank a crap ton of water. And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm just using that extreme example to prove a point. Where does this leave the impressionable, very impressionable, general public? I mean, you slap a sexy label on something, you have some 4K video and a nice voice, and you spin it right, and people are impressionable. They'll go for anything, it seems like. And it's kind of scary. So if a lot of individuals out there listening to the experts from the late 70s, they are going to get fat and sick. If you have a low to no fat diet, you're going to be fat and sick. It may take some fortitude to overcome 35 plus years of nutritional mental conditioning, even though the latest research shows how you can actually be healthier. While low-fat, high-carb diets can result in a weight loss, this is entirely dependent on caloric restriction. This diet is also further complicated as hormone signals following a meal do not support satiety and allow the return of intense feeling of hunger. It is true that research is an eternal quest for knowledge and ever-changing information, and at times it appears research has trumped general trends. A healthy body is surely part of a strong foundation for happy, long, healthy life. And I challenge you and ask you to enjoy your free-range bacon. No nitrates, no extra salt added. The world is filled with experts who are not experts. Individuals have hidden agendas, and I'll tell you my hidden agenda right here and now. My hidden agenda is to create better humans, to live functionized. Improving your daily function in life from the cellular level out is my goal in life. And if we can accomplish that, and we can accomplish that together, then I'm a happy guy. And I will rest my head at night peaceful and sleep well. I hope this podcast has been interesting to you. I hope that you tell a friend. I hope that you utilize this yourself and leave questions or comments on our page, on our social media. Follow us, we will follow you back. DM us. We are www.functionised, functionised.com. You can check out our Instagram at Functionised and our Facebook at Functionised. We also now have a private group, a weight loss support group, which is available on Facebook. DM me or email support@functionised.com, and we will add you to the group. And if you are local, come check us out. It's free to attend. For another podcast, this is your mad scientist, Jim. I am out.